Heather, and I am a teaching artist. I work as a writer and a street artist, predominantly creating tape art. And I also create live art and theatre. And I work with a variety of collaborators to ensure that my work is accessible as possible. I'm also disabled, and I will always introduce myself as a queer, disabled, working class artist, because that's my way of kind of opening up that session for anybody else who may want to introduce themselves in a similar way. So my disabilities are that I have anxiety and depression and a condition called premenstrual dysphoric disorder. Now, many of you might not have heard of that because it's not a condition that's spoken about a lot. Premenstrual dysphoric disorder is that at a point in your menstrual cycle, the production of hormones blocks the production of serotonin to your brain. So for some people who menstruate, that, like me, that might mean you have a couple of down days in bed, but for some people, they have suicidal ideations or they become quite violent. And it's not a condition we talk about that often, which is why I always introduce that and let people know, because I think it's great. If you don't know about it, it's something to go and research. I'm also neurodiverse, and I'm currently undergoing my assessments for ADHD. But as I'm sure many of you know, there is long waiting lists in Scotland. That's around 4 years at the moment. So it feels really important to me that as a teaching artist, I and our community have what we need to be able to work to the best of our abilities. And I think that we really prioritise our participants, which is brilliant, and as it should be. We really think about what they need, but often we forget about what we need as artists, and that can be quite detrimental. We know we get burnt out, we know we get exhausted, and it can be overwhelming. So it's really important to think about what we need. I'm going to start this session by saying, don't feel you need to have your camera on. If you feel more comfortable having your camera off, go for it, okay? There's no shade. I'm never going to be offended if I can't see anybody's face. I can see Madeline's smiling face, and that's great. But don't worry, like Zoom fatigue is real, especially over the last few years. So if you'd like to turn your camera off, that's totally fine. For many of us, we experience sensory overload. So I'd ask that if you aren't currently speaking, make sure that you're muted, just because if there's lots of voices layering over, that can be quite hard for people to understand. You'll see that there's the captioning up. Obviously, I'm Scottish and I can have quite a thick accent. Sometimes the captioning will not pick things up, and so it's just now like it's changed pity to pick, and it'll play about with that because it's trying to understand me. If you don't understand something, if you're using the captions, flag it up. Like, feel free to unmute yourself and be like, Heather, can you repeat that? Or pop something into the chat. Madeline can catch you up, or I can catch you up. I will never be offended if you don't understand my accent. It's all good. So please say. So one of the things I really wanted when we, and actually just before I go on to that, so Madeline obviously mentioned that we are recording this session. I know for some people that is a barrier. They don't necessarily feel comfortable being recorded. It's hard for us to find the right balance for everybody when we've got a big group. I think we've got around 30 odd people and we all have different needs. If you're not comfortable with being recorded, please switch your camera off. If you would like to speak, we can, and say something this time, we can make sure that's edited out if that's important for you. If you'd prefer to type in the chat, that's also fine. We're also going to use Jamboards so that you can communicate in that way. So we've got as many things as we can to try and allow people to communicate in different ways. So hopefully that works. If it doesn't, feed back to us, because this is one of the first times that ITAC has really explored accessibility, and we know we're going to get it wrong and we're going to make mistakes, and it's from mistakes we learn. So we're totally up for feedback. So if there's something that you need, don't be afraid to let us know. So As part of this session, it was really important to me that we prioritise disabled and neurodiverse voices. We know that a lot of the time we fight to be heard, and it can be exhausting. And we often have people who are very well-meaning talking over us, and that doesn't help. So for this next exercise, I'm going to put a Jamboard up into the chat function, and it asks you about barriers. What are barriers to you as a disabled person? What barriers you experience? What stops you working to the best of your ability? It could be a venue you really want to work in, but it doesn't have wheelchair access or lift access. It could be theatre companies that don't employ, well, we would say a British Sign Language interpreter, but American Sign Language interpreter or interpreter in your language. Think about what those barriers are. And you can either unmute yourself and let me know and we can talk, or you can pop a sticky note into the jam. So one of my barriers is long days. I have quite low energy levels, so a long day can exhaust me. So I'll pop that up and save it. Is it saving? There we go. So yeah, on the left-hand side, your sticky note is the square that's got 2 lines on it. Different expectations, definitely. Non-accessible entry facilities, yeah. Scented personal products, like deodorant, perfume, lotions worn by others. Yeah, I feel you. Background noise, e.g. music, chat, other noise. I can't tune it out, and it's very exhausting to try to focus. I feel you on that one. I can't perform or teach afternoon due to COVID fatigue. Long COVID fatigue, yep, absolutely. Travel expenses due to no car and cannot drive. Yeah, a messy room, absolutely. Travel days being also delivery days, also costs for travel expenses, right? It's exhausting traveling. Not having a quiet space or a sleep space, absolutely. Once worked with 2 performers. One had access dog and the other was allergic to said dog. That's tough. In fact, it reminds me of an Am I the Asshole page that I just read on Reddit about a bride and a bridesmaid. The bridesmaid had a working dog. The bride was allergic, and they were trying to figure out how to make it happen. Travel, food allergies at events that require eating, totally, and also the anxiety that brings. Like, I overthink it a lot. I'm like, oh, I know I've given them my food, but like, is it going to be right? Are they going to give me food that's got my allergy in it? Am I going to get sick? Need for a mic or for small groups because of inability to project loudly due to throat issues? Yep, absolutely. Distance from workplace. If I have to travel, I'm exhausted by the time I get there, right? It's a common one, isn't it? Light accommodations, fluorescent lights trigger migraines, absolutely. Non-accessible entry or facilities, no ramp, no elevator, yep. Lack of support staff, absolutely. Not having an online hybrid option, 100%. It's hard. Social events connected to work, always revolving around alcohol. That's a huge one, isn't it? Especially in the arts. You know, like, it's always free drinks for the welcome reception. And, you know, as Scots, we always get really excited about that. But actually, we need to think about that a little bit more and how it impacts on people. I am immunocompromised and need participants to wear masks. Yeah, and that's a really reasonable request. Absolutely. So many great ones coming up. So if anybody wants to unmute themselves and speak, go for it. Don't feel like you need to stay on mute. This is your space and your time to chat. Lack of flexibility. I don't know if I can commit to set days as my symptoms vary day to day. Absolutely. Definitely. Brilliant. I'll leave this up for another couple of minutes. Are people seeing things that are familiar to them? Are there like other people's kind of barriers similar to yours? Yeah, some people are. Yep. Brilliant. Perfect. Oh, I'm just going to... Flexible schedule. Due to autoimmune exacerbations and health management, 3 to 4 hour single scheduled sessions versus 10-week-long sessions of daily teaching for hours. Absolutely. There's so many, and we're going to save this Jamboard, and feel free to keep adding to it throughout the session if that is what you would like to do. I'm just going to stop sharing just for one wee moment so I can see everybody's faces, but feel free to keep adding to that. I found as a disabled artist that there are a lot of barriers, and often I don't realise those barriers until I've started a job, and this was a pattern for years, and I would end up exhausted and frustrated and really run down, and I knew I had to find a way to make things a bit easier for me. So I decided to start using an access statement. And I was just wondering, has anybody else here used an access statement or know what an access statement is? Yeah, Liz does. Brilliant. Jean's nodding away because we've been having, and Heather Bryce, Jean, Heather and I have had some lovely chats about access statements. Other people have popped in the chat saying yes. Brilliant. So an access statement is almost like a disability rider. So when a band goes to a venue, they send in their rider. They say what they want. They want what drinks they want, what water they want, what temperature they want the room at. Our access statement isn't about our wants. We don't get to request blue M&Ms, but we do state our needs, and that's super important. So I've put together a PowerPoint that I'm going to narrate, and I'm also going to put a link to the template in the chat for you to use later, or maybe we'll send that out later. And it talks through the sort of things you can cover in your access statement. And I found this has really made a difference to me in my workplace. So this is my guide to access statements. It's very colourful because it keeps me entertained as I'm putting it together, and I'll just talk you through it. So an access statement should outline your needs in relation to your work. Organisations have a responsibility to make reasonable adjustments to ensure you can work to the best of your ability. Now, in the UK, that's actually law. They have a responsibility to make those reasonable adjustments for disabled and neurodiverse people. This presentation will help you to create your own access statement, and will cover the following: communication, working hours, digital working, concentration, travel, quiet space, printing, reading and spelling, and accommodation. It's in no way a complete list. We will be finding our own things that we want to add to it. And feel free to, if you have a question, feel free to unmute and ask as we go. Don't worry about needing to write notes. I've got a template of all of this that I can send you. So to start with, let's think about wants versus needs. So a need is something that you require because it is essential or very important rather than just desirable. So I need help now. Circumstances in which something is necessary, necessity, the basic human need for food. A want is a desire to possess or do something, to wish for something. So I want an apple, for example. Your access statement should only include your needs. Communication. What methods of communication work best for you? So in my access statement, I say that I prefer to be contacted via email because unexpected phone calls can make me quite anxious. So have a think about what works best for you, whether it's email or phone calls. Are you happy to be contacted on social media, or is this a big no for you? So I'll say I don't mind if you're promoting a project like ITAC have been doing with this, that they're fine to tag me, they're fine to ask me to share things, but I would prefer people not to send me messages about work on like Instagram or Facebook. Is it helpful to let people know you may need a nudge if you haven't replied within a week or 10 days? Now, this is a big one for me. And our lovely Heather Bryce has discovered this one, that sometimes if I have an anxious period, I might forget to reply. I might miss an email. So I have it in my access statement. If I've not replied for a week, give me a nudge and be like, is everything okay? Did you get this email? And actually, by letting people know that, it's helped our working relationship, I think, between myself and Heather Bryce. Working hours. So that's something that came up a lot in the barriers on the Jam board, like that long working hours can be hard, that how many days you can do in a row. So I think it's really helpful to think about what hours you're most productive in. So I tend to work after 11 a.m. because my medication makes me really drowsy in the morning. But then we had somebody in the group who says they are most productive before 12. And equally, that's just as valid. Think about whether short working days are better for you, or how many days in a row are you happy to work? Because we know, ideally, we should only work 4 or 5 days in a row, whether we have a disability or not. But in the arts, and especially when you're freelance, you do tend to try and grab as much work as you can because it's a necessity. So think about what you need in terms of your working hours and days. Digital working. This has obviously become such a huge thing since COVID that we are working more online, and it's great, and it's been so good for so many of us in the disabled community and neurodivergent communities who often maybe struggle to go to venues. So I find it really helpful to put in my access statement whether I'm happy to work online, which I am. Do you need to turn off your camera during Zoom meetings? I tend to turn mine off if I'm feeling anxious or if it's been quite a long meeting and I need a bit of time. What length of Zoom works for you? Do you remember at the beginning of COVID where like I did a week-long digital residency and we were on Zoom like 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. and it was exhausting. So for me, I like to say that I'll do 90 minutes and then take a break. And I guess that's something that we should emphasize with this group. If you need to take a comfort break, go for it. Don't wait for permission. You know what's best for you and your body. So concentration leading on from working times. And again, do you need to take regular breaks? So in my access statement, I'll often state like what breaks I need to take, when I need to take them. I use fidget toys or I doodle a lot during meetings or rehearsals, and that helps my concentration. And I find it's really good to let people know that, because I think sometimes people think that I'm not interested or I'm bored and I'm just drawing away. And it's not that, it's just that I'm struggling to concentrate and I'm quite like, I need to move quite a lot. So actually to have something to do. So like, I've got this like squishy octopus that's here just now. I've got this wiggly like snail, I guess it is, that I play with. I doodle lots. I've got lots of different colour pens. All of that is so helpful to have. But I always let people know why I'm doing that so that they don't feel that I'm ignoring them. So printing, reading and spelling. Do you need text printed on a larger scale? Let people know what size and font is best for you. Do you need text printed on a certain colour of paper, or do you use coloured overlays when reading? So I know a lot of people with dyslexia find it easier to have like a yellow overlay or a green overlay, or text printed on those colours of paper. If you let people know that in advance, it means it's there for you when you come in. So if you're working, say, on a piece of theatre, your script's there and it's printed on that colour paper you need. Or if you use coloured overlays, it's that information is there, and then they're like, oh, or they don't have to ask what you're doing or whatever. So yeah, these things are super helpful. I think this is a big one. So do you often make what others deem as spelling mistakes? So often dyslexic people will state in their access statement that they spell or use grammar and punctuation differently to neurotypical people. And I use the word differently and not wrong, because I think so often dyslexic people are taught the way that they write, the way that they spell is wrong. It's just different. It's communicating in different ways, and that is totally fine. So but it helps to put that in your access statement. You don't need to apologise for that. You definitely don't apologise for that, but you explain that actually maybe I spell slightly different from you. Physical access to buildings and spaces. So do you use mobility aids? Do you need a lift or ramp access to building with stairs? If you can manage a few stairs, how many can you manage? Do you use handrails? Would it be helpful for the organisation to detail the layout of their building in advance, including steps, handrails, and accessible toilet provision? For me, I find this really helpful because I know that I can have a lot of anxiety about going into a new space. So some of the organisations I work with will make a video guide on how to get to their building. So there's a thing in Edinburgh called Ewan's Guide, and they encourage people to make films of how to get to their venue, say from the bus stop, what the street looks like, what it's like when you come into the building, who you might meet, so who's at reception, what they look like. And it just takes a lot of anxiety away from that and can be super helpful for a lot of neurodivergent people. It doesn't need to be big budget. It can be done on a phone. We don't expect miracles, but little things like that can be super helpful. Quiet space. This is a really big one for me. So if I'm on a residency or in rehearsal, I ask for a quiet space that is non-social so I can decompress. So not a staff room, not a green room in a theatre, a space that is genuinely just quiet. When it's a good organisation, when they really have an understanding of working with our community, they have a quiet space already in the building. So Battersea Arts Centre have built a beautiful quiet space with low lighting, with lots of cushions and bean bags and blankets, and it's super helpful just to have that space. So I usually request this during a residency when I'm spending full days in a building, as opposed to when I'm just in for a couple of hours, like leading a workshop. So generally quiet spaces you can request if you're there for a full day or a longer period of time. Travel, and we know that came up for a lot of us on that Jamboard. Can you travel by public transport, bus, train, etc.? It's absolutely fine if you don't, but let people know if you need a taxi into work, and if you can book that taxi yourself, or do you need assistance to book it, and if you require someone to travel with you. All of these things are helpful to send in advance. And this is one that we saw on the Jamboard quite a bit. Can you work on the same day that you travel? This is especially important to think about for longer days and longer journeys. So tomorrow I'm travelling to Mull to work for a week, and that's about an 8-hour journey. It's an island in Scotland, so I will get a taxi, 2 trains, a ferry, and then a bus. So it's a long day. And the organisation I'm working with said, oh, brilliant, but can you still do a session in the evening for us? And I was like, not a chance. I'm going to be exhausted by the end of that. And that counts as a working day for me. That's 8 hours of work, that travel. So no, I don't travel and work on the same days. And I think that's really helpful to put in there so it's clear. You're thinking of your access statement as a contract between you and the organisation. Queuing in crowds. Do crowded rooms or situations make you anxious? Do you need to be socially distanced from other people? Are you able to wait in a queue? This is something that can be challenging for people with chronic pain conditions or ADHD. So a reasonable adjustment, say if you were going to the theatre as part of work, would be to ask front of house to let you know when the theatre's opening and then wait in another area of the theatre, or to ask for a chair to sit in the queue with. Now, I know there's a fair few Scots in this group who know me quite well, and I always just thought I was really impatient, and I would sort of, not tantrum, but I'd get really frustrated and close to meltdown by queuing. And I discovered that that is a symptom of anxiety, but also a symptom of my ADHD. And it's something that because I can't be in control of the queue, I get really frustrated and I really struggle with it. And then I get so worked up that I might not necessarily then concentrate on the piece of theatre or the conference or the talk that I'm going into. So by letting front of house know that I can't queue, but I will happily wait to the side, that has made a huge difference to my mental health. Accommodations. So on a residential project, do you need your own room? We know we should all have our own rooms when we're staying overnight on a project, but also we know that sometimes projects don't have the budget for that. But if it's really important, let them know. Do you require an ensuite or a private bathroom? So I do. So my medication means that I'm up quite often in the night. I need to pee a lot. So for my own peace of mind and for my own comfort, I request an ensuite bathroom. Do you need a fridge to keep medication in? And does that fridge need to be in your room? It can be like a little mini one, but we know that some people have medication that needs to be kept at a certain temperature. Things like that are helpful to know. There'll be other things that you want to add. It might be that you need a heater in your room because your medication or part of your condition means that you get very cold easily, or you might need a window that you can open to get fresh air. All of these things are important to put in your statement. Questions. So this is a big one. Like I said at the beginning, a lot of people don't know about premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And often for me, I've realised that they're unsure about asking. So in my access statement, I say, I'm totally happy to answer questions around my disability. If you're not happy to, that's totally fine as well, because it can be exhausting and it is emotional labour, constantly explaining. And a big part of that is having this access statement that takes some emotional labour away from us. But what you can do in your access statement is add some links where the reader can find further information. So I often include the hidden disability store that explains sunflower lanyards. So in the UK, we have green lanyards with yellow sunflowers on that we wear, and it shows that the person has an invisible disability. And it helps, like in supermarkets, it means you can get additional support if you need it. At the airport, you can queue and go through security faster. So as I said, I struggle with queuing, but going through that priority queue just means things are much more relaxed for me. So yeah, it can be helpful to add some questions and answers in there. I would also say when writing your access statement that it doesn't need to be personal. Don't include your trauma. You don't need to include anything that is too personal to you. It can be very fact-based. So for organisations, so I know that we've said that we would prefer to prioritise disabled and neurodiverse voices today, but we have welcomed people from organisations or teaching artists who obviously are non-disabled and neurotypical. These are really important things for you to know. How to receive an access statement. With thanks. Thank the person who sent you. For many people, an access statement details intimate details and at first can be hard to share. So make sure you thank them for that. Ask questions where appropriate. So, for example, I noticed that you can walk up to 20 minutes comfortably. I wanted to let you know that Edinburgh is quite a hilly city. Is that okay, or would you prefer access to transport? Would that be helpful? Check whether the person sharing the access statement is happy for it to be shared with the wider team. So in the UK, we know we've got GDPR, and that is incredibly important that we do not release people's private information without their permission. So check whether they're happy for their access statement to be kept on file. Is it a need to know only basis? So it's only for you to see, but make sure you have that really explicitly clear. I would like to ask you to take time to return to the access statement and reread it throughout the employment period. So I've recently had a situation with an organisation that I've worked with for years, who are always really supportive, who've recently kind of broken my access statement in a few ways. And I realised it's because they're so used to working with me and they haven't gone back and reread my access statement, and they've forgotten my preferred method of communication or certain access things that I need. So as an organisation, as an employer, as someone who receives that access statement, the onus is on you. You need to keep reading that and checking you're doing what you should. Think about your organisation, your workspace, your area, and what barriers they might impose on a disabled person. Talk with them to find a solution. It should never be no. As I said, in Scotland and the UK, we legally have to make reasonable adjustments so that people can work. And this should happen all over the world. We know it doesn't, but we'd like to see it. So always try and find a solution. Please don't be the barrier. Don't be the barrier that you've seen in that Jamboard and you've heard people talk about. Your organisation is responsible for making reasonable adjustments to ensure that disabled staff members, contracted or freelance, can work to the best of their abilities. Access to work. Now, in the UK, there is a benefit called access to work. And some disabled people receive that, and it provides financial support via the government. It's really important to know that it's not continuous or automatic support for disabled people. Not everyone receives it. And those that do face a wait of approximately 6 months, longer in some regions of the UK, for applications to be processed. So sometimes if you're given a freelance contract and it's starting in 2 months' time, you might have finished that job before access to work goes through. So you might not have that money to provide you your access support. So I like to ask organisations to budget in access requirements where they can. And it's also important to know that access to work is a very limited amount of money. It doesn't cover all of a disabled person's access needs. So I'm going to pause sharing. I know that's a lot of information that you've just received. So I think if we just take 5 minutes just to process, breathe, pee, move, get a cup of tea, and we'll meet back at 1:45, so at 15:45 UK time. Brilliant. I thought we could just have sort of 5-10 minutes for any reflections on that presentation. I know it's a lot of information to digest. Don't feel you need to feed back, but if you have any questions or you've got any observations, feel free to unmute yourself or tap it and post it in the chat. Liz, go for it.
Hi, I just made my access statement for the first time last year, and I've used it a couple of times, and it's been really helpful. But I'm just wondering, would you recommend like just having one standard access statement that you maybe update from time to time, or do you kind of like write a new one for each kind of job or project based on what you predict the demands might be? Because I guess like there are certain things that you think, well, that's not going to be relevant for that job, but then it might end up being, oh, I should put that in my access statement. But I guess you don't need to, like, you don't want to overwhelm them with loads of information that's not going to be relevant, because then they'll maybe not take it all in because there's just too much. You know what I mean?
Totally. It's a hard one. So what I do is my access statement's about 2 pages long, and I'll have like little caveats that say, like, so, you know, when I was talking about needing a quiet space, I'll say if this is, if I'm just doing like a workshop for a couple of hours for you, I don't feel you need to provide me a quiet space. And I didn't realise that I needed to do that until I'd worked with an organisation who got really panicked about not finding me a quiet space in a school. And I was like, oh, I'm only in for 2 hours. And I was like, oh, that's on me. I need to put that in there. So you'll find that your access statement is a working document. And I would keep it as one document. Don't rewrite it for each one, because it's going to exhaust you. And that's more labour as a disabled person that you're constantly having to do. We know that being disabled incurs more time, incurs more cost, all of these things. So have one working document that you can update and change, and you will find it'll change, especially if you had a mental health flare up or, you know, a pain flare up. It does constantly change. And you'll find that people ask you about things, you're like, oh, I never even thought about that. But it's not a hardship, especially for somebody on a salary, to read 2 or 3 pages. I've seen ones that are like 10 pages long. I'd recommend not doing that, because they're not going to read it when it's that length. But you can generally get most of the information you need in a couple of pages. So Anne Thompson has said in the chat, this is so fantastic. Thank you so much, Heather. I'm engaged with a neurodiverse group in a community art project, and actually have issues myself with ADHD and executive function, but I only learned how to manage late in life. I feel you. I think I may have found a few things described in the sticky notes I wasn't even aware of. Absolutely, Anne. I think a lot of the times we don't realise things that we need until it almost gets flagged up by somebody else. And so I think it can be really helpful to keep having these conversations and to share your access statements with friends, or say, would you mind reading this over for me? And I'll quite often ask if, you know, like say to people, feel free to send me your access statement. I'm happy to meet up over a cup of tea and look over it, or email. So obviously, Liz, we live near each other, like we can meet up, we can have a chat about access statements. But, you know, I know that like Jean's in America, she's in New York, so we might have a Zoom. But a part of this Innovator project is that I am here to help with access statements, if that is helpful for people. And we will send a template out to everybody who signed up for this think tank even. I know that we had an amazing sign up of 80 people, but we always know that with think tanks, around maybe a third of that will come. But I think to send that template out, Madeline, if it's okay, to everybody who signed up with some follow-up notes would be super helpful, so that when they then see, when they look at this video or whatever later, they've got it there. Does anybody have any other questions or observations or things they think have missed out? Oh, Rebecca's got her hand up. Go for it, Rebecca.
Hi, thank you. It's amazing. It's so useful. Thanks so much. I work for like an organisation that works with people with disabilities, and with disabled musicians, and we are trying to encourage people to provide access statements, and we're trying to find nice ways to do that. So I'm just wondering if you or anybody else has had any good experiences with like access questionnaires, or if anybody has any good ideas for how to sort of encourage people to provide those documents for us, because we want to be as flexible as we can. But yeah, it's sort of, we don't want to other people by like. Totally. So it's how, is there any way to encourage that, do you reckon?
So what I do at the beginning of a project is that I give everybody a blank access statement template, whether they identify as being disabled or neurodiverse or neurotypical, non-disabled, and I just give everybody that template. And so it puts everyone on an even keel, but it means you get to know your team really well. And actually, like for us on a project we were working on, an R&D of Medusa, one of the performers said, actually, I've just started on the contraceptive pill and it's making me really emotional. So normally I wouldn't identify as being disabled, but actually I think this would be helpful for you to know that at points I'm quite teary. And actually that was great. It was just really helpful to know. Another person said that they were grieving, their grandparent had passed away quite recently, and for us to have that information was really helpful, because we knew that actually they needed to be a bit gentler and a bit softer. So actually I think we all have needs, whether we do identify as disabled or neurodivergent. So I think it's super helpful, and it's just a way of showing that you care about the people you work with. I think we know that it's not going to be accessible for everybody to write it. So think about your access statement might be a video, or it might be a voice note. And there's different ways of doing that. And I know, so Rebecca works with Drake Music Scotland, which is an incredible organisation here. I can imagine you guys creating a really beautiful music access statement with all those sound effects. It can be sung, it could be rap. There's no standard format of what your access statement should look like. It's what works for you. And to be honest, I'd love it if somebody sang me their access statement. I'm here for it.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I love that the captioning is not getting our accents, Rebecca. So if anybody hasn't understood, feel free to let us know. Liz says, would you recommend sending your statement when you apply for the job or after you secure it? I recommend after you secure it, just because we don't know what people are like and what their thoughts are. But I have had organisations say to me, tell me your access statements and access requirements and we'll let you know if we can meet them before we give you the job. And I'm like, that's not how it works. So always after. And as I said, if you're in the UK, they legally are obliged to make reasonable adjustments for you. So Rebecca Mack says, I recently applied for a fellowship, and for the first time in my experience, there was a request for access statement in the body of the application. Interesting. That's cool. Rebecca, where in the world are you? Where are you based?
I'm in Vermont, like Heather Bryce. I'm in the United States in the Northeast.
Nice.
Yeah. Hi, Heather.
That's cool. And how did you feel about including that access statement?
Thanks for that question. I felt thrilled, actually. I actually, because of the tone of the other questions in the fellowship, I felt like they were asking for it because they wanted to meet the needs. So I felt trustful, and I have no idea if I'll get the fellowship, but it was a really thrilling experience for me to be like, yes, I will tell you right now that I am disabled, and I will tell you what things I can do and what things I can't do and what things will help me be able to do all the things. Thanks for asking. It was
brilliant.
Really inclusive for me. Yeah.
Definitely. Thank you. So Sarah Little says, as a middle manager, do you have any advice on how to balance access needs of others with a less than empathetic set of expectations from the organisation? It's a hard one, isn't it? I think as a disabled person, I'm sure many of you will agree this, that we're used to fighting and it's exhausting. And I know that I myself can be in fight mode. Almost, it's hard to turn it off. So to know that you have this middle manager that is wanting to support you, first of all, that's huge. That's really important. Express that to the person you're working with, that you are there to support them. I think in terms of the organisation being less than empathetic, I think it's really important to look at the laws in your country and what you are meant to provide. And that's something, and I was going to plug it a little bit later, but I'll do it now. Jean, Heather and I have a working group going on at the moment, and we're exploring global disability culture. And we're looking at what disability means to you as a disabled person in your country, what the laws are around that, what support and what provision there is. And it's been super useful. So I think we're looking for other people to join us. We're going to break into subgroups, but we'd be super keen for other people to join with us. We've had some brilliant artists from Singapore joining us. I think Jeffrey, you in the group? Jeffrey Tan. he was chatting to us loads about the Purple Parade, which, Jeffrey, I hope I'm not putting you on the spot. Would you mind letting people know about the Purple Parade, just just in a few sentences, just telling us a little bit about that? Because I guess I didn't expect, and it's maybe quite ignorant, but I always viewed Singapore as a country that had a lot of restrictions, and I didn't think so much about the celebrations they have. So hearing Jeffrey talking about how they celebrate disability culture was huge for me. And now I'm like, I'm going to Singapore, I'm going to the Purple Parade. So yeah, Jeffrey, if you were always having a wee look to put the link up, but yeah, the Purple Parade sounded pretty awesome. And if Jeffrey was up for unmuting himself and letting us know about it, that'd be cool. Or if not, I can summarise. So Jeffrey's looking for the link, but basically from my understanding of it is that the last Purple Parade they did, there was 10,000 people made up of organisations and disabled people who marched together in celebration of the disabled community. And the march ends in a big gig, a big music festival. And there's stalls and, oh, Heather Bryce popped the link up. Thanks, Heather. Oh, Jeffrey, so Jeffrey's saying I've had a long day. I look like a zombie just now. No worries at all. And also, what's the time with you, Jeffrey? It's probably like silly o'clock. But yeah, it just was a really beautiful celebratory project. And I'm going to Singapore now. I'm like, I want to experience this. You know, we do 11 p.m. So yeah, it's late for Jeffrey. He's in his jammies. He's just trying to chill out, and I'm trying to get him on Zoom. Oh, no worries, Elizabeth. Thank you. So, yeah, where else do we see genuine celebrations of disabled culture? Does anybody see that in their countries on a large level? So I think Ori and Rachel got kicked out of there. They're out walking their dogs while joining this Zoom, which is like, I love the commitment. So Ori, we're just chatting about Singapore and how they do a day called the Purple Parade, and it's a celebration of disability culture. And last time there was 10,000 people marching in celebration of the disabled community. And I was asking, does anybody know of any other celebrations within their countries that celebrates disabled and neurodivergent communities? So I guess we don't. Oh, it's a small, Recamac says, it's a small level, but I teach drumming with disabled adults and there's much celebration of themselves in the class. Yep, absolutely. Rebecca Mack, you need to chat to Rebecca DeRollo, who spoke earlier, because she's also a drummer and teaches disabled adults and children. So yeah, I feel like you two would get on really well. Beth House says, Unity Festival here in Wales, run by High Jinks Theatre, but not like Purple Parade, so maybe not on that scale. I'm going to note that down, because I haven't heard of that one. I just want to tour all the disability festivals and events now. That sounds pretty cool. In the UK, there is Unlimited, who run a festival, and they work with disabled artists, neurodivergent artists, and they work through theatre, music, film, and visual arts. Beth House says, it's amazing. A few years ago, they brought back-to-back theatre from Australia. Awesome. And of course, Heather Bryce has linked to the Lincoln Centre, and they have a festival called the Big Umbrella Festival. And Jean and Heather will correct me if I'm wrong, but it's predominantly for neurodivergent people. Am I right? And there's a link in the chat, you can have a look at it. And having watched the videos of it over the years, it's a gorgeous festival on the Lincoln Centre campus, and there's visual art, there's theatre. It just looks really beautiful, and it really has access at its heart, and that's something we want to see more of. So yeah, definitely check out Big Umbrella Festival because it looks gorgeous. That's somewhere else I want to go. I'm just touring all your festivals, guys. I'm here for it. Awesome. So as I was saying, we're looking for people to join this working group. We're really keen to see that because we want to change how ITAC engages with disabled and neurodiverse people. So I was wondering, who's been to an ITAC or an ITAC before, an in-person one? You can wave or pop a wee heart up or a reaction. Jean has. That's because Jean's the queen of ITAC, and Heather Bryce has. Brilliant. Yeah, so some of you have and some of you haven't. So my experience with Jeffrey's been to several ITACs, yeah. And Beth says, no, just joined. Rebecca DeRollo says, not yet, but I would love to. So my very first ITAC was when it was in New York in Madeline, correct me, 2018?
Yep, that's the one.
Perfect. And I went on my own, and I was quite nervous, and this was before I knew what an access statement was or had even thought about it. But what I found was a really, really welcoming community. And then the next ITAC was 2 years later, and that we know that the pandemic started, and it was meant to be in Seoul in Korea, but it went online. And that had a whole different set of challenges with it. The fact that we were working at Korea time, but we had the opportunity to engage with videos later, although I thought it was a great idea to reset my body clock, do it at Korean time, and then had jet lag afterwards. But it was amazing to be able to engage with people all around the world. The last ITAC was in Oslo last year, and I think that's the first time that I'd really been properly using an access statement, and had really understood my disabilities, understood my neurodiversity and what I needed, and wasn't masking, because we know we mask a lot as disabled artists and we hide how we're feeling and we just get on with it. And because I was so used to, by this point, actually, this is what I need, this is who I am, that I just kind of got on with it. And it wasn't until Jean and Heather and the team from the Lincoln Centre did a presentation on working with neurodiverse artists that I suddenly realised that I'd been masking this whole time, and I just kind of let go. And I was like, oh my goodness. And it was a whole build-up of emotions. And I can remember running up to Jean afterwards and bursting in tears and giving her a big hug, and Jean being the beautiful woman that she is, just holding me and being like, yes, I see you, I understand. And it made us really think, actually, we need to really think about what we do at ITAC to ensure that it's genuinely accessible for all of our community. And that's a huge job, because we're working with partners all over the world. So the next ITAC is in New Zealand, it's in Auckland. So we know that we need sign language interpreters, we need captioning. The working language will be English, but that won't be everyone's first language. We need to make sure there's quiet spaces. We need to make sure it's physically accessible. There's so many things we need to do, but we can only do all those with the support of our community. So we're super open to you sharing with us what your needs are, what would help you, what you'd like to see at a large scale conference that's bringing teaching artists together. So you can, oh, thank you, Madeline. So feel free to, we've maybe got about 10, 15 minutes left. You can unmute yourself. Don't worry about putting your hand up, just go for it, unmute yourself. If there's things that you would like to see happening with either think tanks online or at ITAC in person, let us know, or type it in the chat. or feel free to feedback. Like Madeline, like you've got her email address, she'll pass things on to me, and she'll pass things on to Jean and Heather Bryce as well. But off the top of your heads, is there anything you'd like to see? What would make things easier for you at a conference or an event? I'm pushing for a couple of quiet areas for this next ITAC, so that we've got spaces to decompress. Option to join on Zoom, Liz says, yeah, definitely. And I think we managed that in Oslo for the main sessions, didn't we? We had, so ITAC generally you'll find throughout the day there's some big main sessions that everybody's in the room for, and then you break out into workshops. So for main sessions, those were available via Zoom. So maybe we need to work to have a digital element to our workshops as well. Catrice Greer says, in quiet areas, sensory, sensitive. Yep, absolutely. So no worries, Rebecca. Rebecca says, sorry I have to run. Thank you so much, Heather and ITAC people. Feels great to be part of a community in what can sometimes feel like a lonely sector. I hope to meet more of you soon. Oh, thank you, Rebecca. So yes, sensory, sensitive and quiet areas, 100%. So for me, that would look like low lighting, low sound, some stim toys. If there's other things, pop those in. Let us know. Madeline, am I giving you a big funding nightmare now? Being like, we want all this stuff.
This is going to be a New Zealand type of an undertaking. So you will pass them to me and I will pass them to other people. So excellent. Keep them coming and we can make a list.
Brilliant. Anne Thompson says, recordings from Oslo have been fantastic as a resource. I've rewatched them and shared info with my community. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Anne. That's really helpful. Catrice Greer, in the main sessions in person, lighting to be sensory sensitive, no harsh lighting, absolutely. I went to a brain injury conference recently and the lighting was harsh. Oh my goodness. It was migraine triggering, hard to see with photophobia and hard for persons with photosensitive seizures, etc. That's wild for a brain injury conference. Catrice, I can't believe they did that. But that's something we really need to think about at ITAC is lighting, because we know when we get these gorgeous venues and the technicians want to show off what they can do, but actually it doesn't work for everybody. So we do need to think about sensory lighting, sound, supplying things like ear defenders. Sometimes I supply ear defenders and sunglasses at shows for people, so that if the lighting it does happen to be too bright for them, they can pop it on. But yeah, we definitely need to look at those things. Thank you, Catrice. Brilliant. Permission to unmask, fidget, stim, etc. Liz says, absolutely. So there's an artist, and Liz, I think you might know her, called Jess Tom, and she runs a theatre company called Tourette's Hero, and she has Tourette's. And when I first worked with her, I definitely didn't have as good an understanding of Tourette's as I thought I did. I thought, as a lot of people do, that it's all about you're swearing or saying inappropriate things. But actually, for Jess, it's a huge physical pain on her body, especially when she's trying to hold things in. So Jess is now a wheelchair user because it's really impacted her mobility. It also makes her want to do the most dangerous thing in any given situation. So we would be told not to leave scissors lying around, things like that, because she'd want to cut herself or cut somebody's hair or whatever. But when you go to see one of Jess's shows, it is the most inclusive, safe environment, and she gives you the permission at the beginning of the show to unmask. She says, feel free to shout, stim, move about, to tick. And I think especially in theatre or music, we don't have that. We're like, everybody should be quiet, sit in a nice row and clap politely at the end. And it's not realistic. Not everyone can do that. And it stops our art forms being accessible to everyone. So to give that permission to unmask and fidget and stim and tick is super important. And actually to think about alternative seating. So Jess quite often will have a lot of bean bags that people can lie on at the front. Or when I've been to a show with Jess, she'll bring her own bean bag and she'll lie down because she can't sit the whole time. So thinking about different ways of working and sitting is really good. When Jeffrey says windows in between sessions for networking, and he says great idea with alternative seating. Yeah, breaks in between sessions. I know at ITAC we get so excited and we want to jam as much in as possible, and then you end up running in between and then you're talking to people, but actually knowing that you have that permission to take a break if you need to, super important. It's really helpful. And these all feel quite doable, don't they, Madeline?
Yeah, I don't think there's, I mean, again, I'm not the conference organizer, so I don't want to speak for someone else who's not here, but it feels like all of this is very manageable in the context of what ITACs have historically been. I'm not seeing anything that so far makes me go, well, that's going to need a conversation and funding and an explanation, you know?
Yeah. And one thing I would be interested in, and people can let me know in the chat or unmute themselves, whatever is best. How would you feel about a short blank access template being sent to you with your booking form for ITAC? So normally, like, people will say, do you have any requirements? And like access requirements, and that's it. And a lot of the time we're like, oh no, like I don't have any physical like requirements, and we forget about actually the mental and the neurodiverse ones that we need. How would you feel if there was some short questions or a short template access statement that went out to you? Would that work for people? Having a think, having a type. Anne Thompson says, great idea. Yep, definitely. And these are all things to think about. Like, you never need to respond straight away. Like, it takes time. Great idea for access questions, says Jeffrey. And that's something that the group, that our working group has really helped me with, is permission to be silent and permission not to have to respond. And I've found that so helpful from Jeffrey and Heather and Jean, because sometimes, and as you'll hear just now, I feel the need to talk and talk and talk. So it's really good to be like, actually, it's okay to be quiet. King says, another conference recommendation, audio description, verbal description, and touch tours. Absolutely. And actually, you reminded me that I didn't do my audio description and my description of myself at the beginning and what I looked like. And so I think it just shows that even somebody who works in access and inclusion can get it wrong and can make mistakes and needs reminders. And that's why we need a community of people to talk about things. So yeah, absolutely. I should have started my session by saying, I'm Heather, I'm a white woman, I have short curly hair with my roots that definitely need done. I'm sitting in my living room, which is quite bright and sunny in Leith in Edinburgh. And that's what I would normally do, but I forgot today. So actually, things like that are super important. And I think that permission to make mistakes and have somebody else go, you forgot that, or we have a chat, so helpful. Social story to let people know of expectations for the day, or the video tour thing that you mentioned earlier. Brilliant, Liz, absolutely. A social story would be really helpful. So that can be done by photographs, or it can, just be like a running order of the day, but a little bit more animated with a bit more information and images, and to be able to have that either in your hand, on your phone, to listen to or to watch is really helpful. But yeah, the video the video tour thing for getting to venues is super helpful. I worked with Dance Space in Edinburgh on theirs, and it shows you the walking route from the bus stop, coming in, where the stairs are, where the lift is when you come in, what it looks like, who will meet you at reception and their names, what the studios look like, and it just alleviates that anxiety. Oh, brilliant, thank you. Heather Bryce has posted the link to Social Stories. Heather Bryce is a legend with links. It's always brilliant. Audio version of any written information, Liz says. Yeah, absolutely. Audio, video, typewritten, definitely. We need all those things. It's a big job.
Heather?
Yeah?
I know this probably isn't what one would usually think about putting on an access statement, but I think I've learned this from you.
Yeah.
I might say, I need for you, the organization, to have a sense of humor.
Yes.
You bring such you bring serious fun.
Oh, thank you, Jean.
You know, it's a serious subject, but you bring such a genuine sense of humor to it that I think, oh, I need that on my access statement. Bring a sense of humor. So I thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. And Jean, I thank you for just always having a really lovely, welcoming presence. You always make people feel so comfortable. Jean is like the godmother of ITAC, I reckon. She always makes you just feel really welcome and secure. And I really appreciate that. And I wouldn't have worked so much with ITAC if it wasn't for the support Jean gives. So I really appreciate it and encourage you to get to know Jean. Jean, your voicemail is going to be popping off. Your inbox is going to be going wild. Sorry, everybody.
No, you're making me want to go off camera, though.
Oh, sorry. So Liz, right, so Rebecca Mack says social stories are helpful for everyone. Absolutely. Liz says offer a person to meet outside and go in with you if you're anxious about arriving alone. Absolutely. That's a huge one. And especially at ITAC, where we're all traveling from all over the world to come together. And like my first one, I went to New York on my own, and it was huge and it was overwhelming. And I found very quickly that people were really friendly, but actually if we had somebody there to meet you, it would make it so much easier. So that's something we need. We need somebody greeting people outside the building to make a connection before we come into that space, an early connection. Elena says, love the series fun. Thank you, Heather and ITAC, for all your work and for sharing here. Very informative. Oh, thank you. Thank you for being here. So, Heather Bryce, how is it okay if we share your email address in the chat for anybody who'd be interested in joining our working group?
Yeah, absolutely, Heather. And just to say too, we're really looking to increase cultural diversity. So right now we're very heavy on the US and Singapore. That doesn't mean if you're from those areas, you can't be involved. There are tons of ways to be involved. But if you identify as a teaching artist who has a disability, or if you work with folks who are disabled and you're from another area, please, please, please join the core working group. And otherwise reach out, let us know, and we'll find ways for you to be involved.
Absolutely. And we can put my email address in the chat as well. I'll do that now. So if people want me to look over an access statement or want to chat more about access statements, I'm always happy to do that. So my email address is creative_electric@hotmail.com, and feel free to email me if you've not heard from me. After a week, give me a nudge, especially if I'm in a big project or if I'm working somewhere like Mull, where we don't always have great reception. Yeah, give me a nudge. Gideon says, so nice, I'm so excited. Thank you, Heather and ITAC. Thank you for being here, Gideon. So yeah, if you would like to join our working group, email Heather Bryce. We generally meet once a month with the idea of having a subgroup as well in that month. So the commitment would never be any more than 2 meetings a month. And obviously we're very understanding and very flexible of people's needs and accommodations. So you might be interested, but you might not have the spoons to be able to join at that point. You can voice note us, you can email us. We've got a Google Working Doc that you can feed into. There's lots of different ways to connect. So on that note, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. It's been so lovely to see so many familiar faces, see new faces, and just see and hear people excited about connecting with one another, and especially connecting as disabled and neurodiverse teaching artists. So thank you so much, everybody. I'll stay on the Zoom for the next like 5-10 minutes. If people want to ask questions or want to send private messages, that's totally cool. But thank you so much. Thanks. Bye, Liz. Thank you.